Before we start this video, large thank you to Hamcorn, Glenn, Wizboyd, Sebri, and Kyle for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And a special thank you to Mike Harden Games for their immense support to this channel on Patreon. Hello guys, this is going to be a bit of a long one because we're going to do every other action we did not do in the last couple of videos. So I'm going to make a new folder. This is a temporary folder. I'm going to call it Things to Do This Video. And I'm just going to drag all the functions, or actions rather, in here. And as we complete them, I'll drag them out just so we don't get confused as to where we're at. So I'm going to make a script here. I'm going to call this Aim Action. And this will be for the aiming of the bow, in the future the crossbow. And then I'm going to drag it into that folder there. And I'm going to make another script. I'm going to call this Fire Action. Fire Arrow Action specifically. Put that in there. And then I will make another script here. We're going to make a bunch. And this is going to be our Magic Spell Action. So this will be for casting magic specifically. And we're going to make separate ones for Pyromancy and Miracles. This will allow us to skip the item check. Because you can only, this action will be only placed on a weapon that can cast magic spells. So you don't need to check if it's a stave, for example. Then we're going to make the Pyromancy Spell Action script. And lastly, the Miracle or Faith Spell Action script. Let's do that as well. You can call it whichever. I'm going to call mine Miracle Spell Action. And we are going to make a couple more. I might wait till the end of the video just to see for one, but let's just call it, we're going to make Draw Arrow Action too. I forgot about that one. Check my list here. Let's make another one. This one's going to be called Parry Action. So we'll give Parry a specific action because it's not going to work like Weapon Arts, where you enter a stance. It's going to be its own thing. And then we can drag all of these into the things to do in this video. Okay, so I'm going to begin with the Aim Action script. So double click on that and open it up. And now we're going to go and follow the logic inside of our Combat Manager and trace it back and basically paste it in here. Just adding your namespace, delete the start and update function, make it derive from item action, and then let's go and get started by first checking into the, or calling upon the override state rather. And then let's go over to any other action and copy the create asset menu and just paste it in there so we can make this in the game when it's complete. I'm just going to call it Aim Action, and that looks good. Alright, so I believe we call this on the input handler, and then we go from there to the player combat manager, and then we go from there to another function. So let's start off over here. Actually, or did we? I think we might have replaced everything on the input handler in the last episode. Yes, we did. Okay, so I'm actually going to need to go to the player combat manager. So let's do that instead, and then we'll look for the logic there. Just going to scroll back up here, and here we go. Go to definition. Alright, so we're looking for the aim action. So let's go to LB action, perform LB aim action. Here it is. Now, let's take the logic from this and put it into our new function. And here it is, down here. So I'm just going to delete this now. We're basically going to clean up this whole script this episode, except for, I think, one, maybe two functions. So, it's okay that all these errors exist. That's fine. Let's copy all of the logic inside the aiming action. And let's go ahead and paste that into the aim action script we just made. Well, inside the perform action function specifically. Okay, replace player manager with player. And it'll be player.inputHandler and player instead of player manager. And that looks good. You might have to make a few alterations near the end. I'm going to bug test all this too, just briefly. I'm going to attempt to perform every action that we've done in this video. Okay, I'm going to erase that now. Alright, so let's move along here now. I'm just reading this and making sure I got my ducks in a row. Let's go over to the next script, which will be, I'm just going to drag this out here into item actions because it's done. And that's probably going to unload the script from Visual Studios because we have errors. I'm going to open up the draw arrow action. I'm going to make my namespace here. And I'm going to delete the start and update functionality and make this derive from item action, as is going to be the case with all of these scripts in this video. So now let's just play detective again. We just got to go back to our combat manager, and we're gonna, that did unload it. I thought I was gonna do that. And then we're going to basically plug in the logic that we have in our combat manager right here. Also paste your create asset menu name. I'm gonna call this one draw arrow action. Okay, looks good. Now over here, let's look for where we draw our arrow. Here it is. Copy everything here, and then you can erase the function. Let's go back over here and paste it. And then we'll call upon our perform action first, override it, and then paste it inside the function. Next, say player, player animator manager. And the same thing goes for here. Basically, wherever you see an error, just put player dot in front of it because we're calling upon all these variables now through the player manager script. So the inventory is called through the player. The animator manager is called through the player. The weapon slot manager is called through the player. It is all called through the player manager, which is nice and organized. And that means we only got to pass one reference, which is the player manager. I'm also going to add some comments here. I'm going to start doing that. We're going to just to keep it all, very straightforward. So this section of the code is going to animate the player. Then this one would instantiate the arrow. So I'm just going to say instantiate arrow. And then we would have the bow being animated in itself, so we can put that down. I'm just going to actually move this line of code because this is for the arrow instantiation, so we can put that up there. I just want to keep it all very neat, so if you ever come back to this a long time down the road, you know what everything does right off the get-go. So I'm just going to call this animate bow, and that should be fine. Again, I might have to make some small alterations to this when I check it all, like I might have to perform a check for something, but right now that's okay. I'm going to drag that out into the item actions script, and I'm going to open up the fire arrow action. And then I'm going to do the same thing as I do every script, put in my namespace, delete, start, and update, and make this derive from item action. So, again, let's just go back and see what we've done in our player combat manager. This whole episode really is playing detective because there's a refactor. We're just basically moving logic and making small changes to it to support the new system. So in the player combat manager, the fire arrow action is right here. This one's quite long. Okay, so copy the entirety of it and then erase the function. We don't need that anymore. It's done. And call upon the function to override and then paste it inside. Let's go down through this and see. I think everything is good here except for, so again, just put player in front of everything. And if you see the phrase player manager, just erase the manager and just leave player. I think everything is good in here, but I believe our camera handler script is actually private on the player manager, so we'll have to set that to public. Yes, it is. Okay, so we'll do that momentarily. For now, whoops, not player.player manager, just player. Just leave that for now. Just going to make sure it's actually on the player manager. I know it is, though. Player.player inventory, player.player inventory. The same as here and the same as here. So this is a very straightforward process, obviously. And this is a much nicer and cleaner system because now all the logic is housed independently on its own action script as opposed to it all being cluttered under the combat manager. Because you can have a lot of different kinds of actions. And having them item dependent is much, much nicer. Okay, so yeah, on the player manager here, make camera handler public. And then just go back and repeat the process again. Just player.camera handler and we'll be good to go. I'm just going to paste that there. Paste that there. And paste it there. Okay, also guys, before I move on, I'm doing a bug squashing video, so a housekeeping video. So if you have any bugs and you're caught up in the series, please go ahead and DM me on Discord the bug. And if you can, as much information about it as possible, how you replicate it, and if you're able to, a short video of the bug would be perfect. Now, next, I'm going to go over into the scripts folder again, item actions, and I'm going to drag this out into the main folder because that's done. So this is going quite quickly. We've only got four left here right now, so that's good. And 3 of these are identical, minus 1 word. So go up here, putting a namespace, erase, start, and update, make this derive from item action again, and since this is a magic spell action, it's going to work identical to the Miracle and Pyromancy spell action, except it is going to have one check that's different. So basically, come in here, go to your Perform Magic action, which is right here, and we're going to basically take everything inside here, but then we're going to delete it. We've only got 2. It appears we've only done the Pyromancy in the past and the Faith. Well, now we're doing magic, so that's fine. Let's erase that. And you can get rid of the functionality then. And we actually don't need to check the weapon type, you see, because if the weapon has the ability to cast the magic spell action, it's going to have that as an action. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So you don't need to make a check because you're the one manually putting these actions on the items. So we know if we get to this point, this item is meant to be able to cast magic, is what I'm trying to say. So all we have to check is, do we have a current spell, and is that spell a magic spell? So right here you can see we're checking for the weapon. That's only needed on the old system. We can actually delete that and just copy the logic inside of it and keep that. It will be if players interacting return. So right now what we're going to want to check for obviously is a magic spell. player.player inventory. And if you want, it's a bool right now, but on my solo project, I actually use an enum for a spell type, but it doesn't matter. There's only 3 spell types, so you don't really need to use enum. I just think it looks a bit neater. And everything else is the same. Just put your player dot in front of everything so you can get all your references from the player manager. I think the is left hand is going to be is using left hand. Yeah, it will be. So we'll have to say player dot is using left hand. Yes. Okay. There we go. That will dictate which hand the spell's cast from. And player dot player animation manager dot play target animation. Okay, so again, we can actually go over to the miracle spell action. Sorry guys, my throat today, it's very dry. Need to drink something. And the pyromancy spell action and do the exact same thing. So eradicate the start and update function, put in your namespace, call from item-based action, and then paste the exact same logic in the override function. And the only thing you're going to change is on the miracle spell action, you're going to want to change magic spell to faith spell. And on the pyromancy one, you're going to want to change it to pyromancy spell. That's it. Everything else is the same. We're checking for our current focus points. We're checking for which hand we're using, and then we're playing the spell animation, and we let the animation do the work from there, because then it will have a successfully cast spell if it gets far enough in, and then it's the exact same as our old system. So that will be fine. And now I have you here, because I don't need to really narrate over this anymore, as it's the exact same process. We're actually going to also do the backstab and riposte action, which we'll call handle critical attack action. So we'll make that after we're done all of these, and that'll just be very simple too. It's like 5 lines of code. We'll make that a hold RB action. And some weapons actually can't perform a backstab or riposte in Dark Souls. Like I believe the bow can't. So it's actually good that we have item-based actions now, because you can actually just leave that blank if you don't want every weapon in your game to be able to riposte or backstab. Okay, that looks good. Now, let's go and do the, I think it's a parry action next. Let's see. Let's drag all these up first. Yes, it's the parry action. And I will briefly test all these too, just to make sure they do work before I end the video. But if you guys have any problems with them or notice anything, just let me know. I'm also going to highlight a potential problem people can have. Not a problem, but just something you might want to, I guess, nerf, so to speak. But I'll get to that eventually. So let's make the parry action again, derived from item action. And I'm actually going to do the parry action a little bit different. And this, it's not going to be the same as it was before, where we go through and make our weapon play its weapon art. I'm just going to actually give it its own logic. So if we're interacting, first of all, return, and I'll show you how to do a quick parry and a normal parry. So we can actually check the weapon type when doing this, okay? So we put in a new variable in the last video. It's called current item being used. Let's start off by erasing our hand IK for our weapon. So if we have hand IK set, it's not making the parry look weird. We can make a variable called weapon item. Let's call this parrying weapon, and let's make that equal player.player inventory manager.current item being used as a weapon item. So we cast it, because if you're entering this function, you have to be using a weapon. And we're going to say some comments here. Check if parrying weapon is a fast parrying weapon or a medium parrying weapon. So you give a small shield or a medium shield. You know what I'm saying? Now, I don't have 2 different speeds of parrying animations set up. I'm just doing this for a demonstration in case you guys do. I know some of you definitely do. Under enums, you'll see I just have the shield variable here, right? Or, sorry, the shield weapon type. Well, we can actually make a small shield weapon type. You can call it whatever you want. You can make it a dagger parry if you wanted to, but I'm just going to use small shield because that's what Souls uses, I do believe. And now we can basically just make a check here on the parry action, and we can say if we're using a regular shield, then we'll play our regular parrying animation. So if weapon type equals small shield, however, we'll play a faster parrying animation. So you can just make it parry fast. Now you can do this by a number of ways. You could actually have a whole different parry animation, which is what Souls does, or you can just increase the speed of the animation specifically when you enter this function right here. I would just have its own animation if it was me doing it, and that's what I'm going to do in my solo project, but there's many, many different ways to do this. So just make sure you're saying, yes, we are interacting, yada, 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 and then do the else if parrying weapon dot weapon type equals shield. Then you would do your regular parry animation. And like I said, I don't have 2 speeds of parry animations, so I'm just going to use the same animation here. This was just for demonstrations. And we save that, and that should be good. Just going to put a comment here for normal parrying animation. All right, let's save. Now, I need to reload all these scripts just a second, because when I move them. So let's go over to our player comment manager first. Let's get rid of all these dead functions. So delete that and delete the handle LB, handle LT action. That's none of this is being used anymore really, except for two things. Erase the handle RB action. Man, this looks so much cleaner. Erase the hold RB action. Erase the perform range action and perform LT weapon. I'm just gonna look at this to make sure there's nothing in there that we. Nope, that's good. Eradicate that, and then right here, erase this. And now we have successfully cast spell, and attempt, backstab, or riposte. Perfect. And those things are being used because we're going to use the attempt, backstab, or riposte right now. Let's make one new item action, and we're going to call this, I'm just going to call it critical attack action. So let's go to item actions and scripts, things to do. You can drag at the Parry Action. We can obviously come out now and delete this folder. Let's just delete that right there. And then let's make a new script. Let's call this critical attack action. Okay, now let's open up critical attack action. Let's delete the start and update method again. Again, throwing a namespace, and then make this derived from item action. And this will be the last one in the video. So we're actually just going to make a very, very simple check here. We want to make sure we call in the override equation for perform action, or the override function, sorry. And then right away, we are going to want to check if we are interacting. We don't want to be able to perform a backstab or riposte if we're already locked into some action. And then we just call upon our player, .player combat manager, .attempt backstab or riposte, and it handles it right from there. So that's perfect. And that's it. You're good to go. Now you can put this under any weapon for hold RB, and you'll be able to perform a backstab or riposte as per usual. So we still have a few things to do. That's all the actions out of the way, but we have to fix a few bugs. I have to refresh all these scripts because I have to create asset menu names under them all, or else we can't use them. So under the fire action, let's go here. I'm going to call this fire action. And under the magic spell action, I will call that magic spell action, etc., etc. Just make sure you put an asset menu for all of these, call them whatever you like. And I think we've broken a couple things in the input handler, potentially, so we need to fix those. And I'm also going to just adjust a couple things that I was looking at, and I thought to myself, why did I do that? This was a long time ago. And I know I had some different route planned in my head, but I didn't end up going that way. So now there's just a little bit of dead code there. It's where I call upon the delta variable in the player locomotion manager, and they're just empty variables not being used. Also, I want to change how we reset our bulls. I did it in a very simple way back in the beginning of the series, but there's a much cleaner way to do it that isn't. It's not that our way right now is memory intensive. It's just there's a better way to do it. We reset our inputs on the late update right now. So I am going to, okay, let's see. Yeah. So handle hold RB input. Yeah, right here. We didn't actually have this one done. So let's actually fix this function. I'm going to copy it and delete it and then paste it up here. I'm going to scroll all the way up until I get to the RB inputs. There we go. RB input. So I'm going to put it right below handle tap RB input. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing in the tap RB input. I'm just going to basically check, paste in that we're using a right hand. Then I'm going to say we're using a right weapon. And then I'm going to say player inventory.rightweapon.hold RB action. And that will be the attempt, backstab, or riposte on most weapons. On some weapons, it might not be anything. And then we have another error here under the handle fire bow input. Now, I'm just going to double check. I don't think we need the fire flag anymore. And I don't think we need this, but I'm going to just scan, see where we use the fire flag. Let me check my notes too. Yeah, okay. So it's only just being used to turn on when the RB input is canceled. So normally you'd hold it, draw the arrow, let go of it, fires the arrow. That's all well and good. We can delete that. We can actually just get rid of that and the fire flag bull itself, and then the function down there, because we're going to handle that through an input item action now, not through the input handler itself. So let's delete this too. Okay, good. Excellent. Now save it. Let's delete this from the tick input. Can't call a function that no longer exists. And let's see. Okay, item actions. Let's create a new aim action. It's called aim action. Let's just create them all. Okay, so we got aim action, we got blocking, attempt critical attack action. Let's do that. Call it critical attack action. Create items, item actions, draw arrow action. Let's see. Yep, got that. Fire arrow action. Okay. What's next? Create again. Let's do got that already. Cast magic spell action. And then obviously I think it'll be the cast Pyromancies and Miracles will be next. And the Parry Action. And that'll be all of them. So I'm going to plug these into some weapons, and we're going to play around with some stuff and make sure we get it all working. I think we need to put a couple checks in potentially, that's it, into the item action scripts themselves. But other than that, they should work just fine. So I'm going to start off by going over here and into my shield, and put the Parry action in the tap LT action. So if I tap LT, there we go, parry. Excellent. Working as intended. Okay, now in the talisman here, I'm going to put in the tap RB and tap LB miracle spell action. And I don't think we have a tap LB input set up. It's only the hold LB right now. I want them to be different, so I'm going to go ahead and make a button for tap. And if you want to, you can actually put the tap... actually, I'll get to that in a second. Let's go and make a private void handle tap LB input. And then we're going to make it behave basically identical to the tap RT input. So this right here is a bit different because this is holding, and this is gonna, usually holding is specifically for something like aiming or blocking, so it does behave a little bit different. But right now, if we go to the RB input, which is actually a tap RB input, I'm gonna rename that in a bit. Let's make another public bool, call it tap LB input. And then let's go over to the player controls. I don't know what to call this thing here, and open it up. Let's make a tap LB input. Look at my other inputs here. Let's just call this one tap LB. What we can do too on the other inputs is put an interaction on them for tap. You can do that for the RB too if you want to. You don't need to do it. And you can rename them to tap because they're going to do different things now. I'm going to rename them, and I'm going to put the tap interactions on them as well. So left shoulder, gamepad, and Q on the keyboard is the same thing as the LB, except it only registers as true when you tap the button, whereas the LB one just registers as true regardless. And right here, we actually have to put in some logic here to make it change our bool. So I'm going to copy and paste the LB line. I'm going to change LB to tap LB, and I'm going to change LB input to tap LB input. So basically, if we tap a button, it passes the interaction check in the player controls. It will turn our tap LB input to true. And now let's go up, and like I said, it'll behave pretty much identical to the tap RB input, which right now we just have called RB input. I'm going to rename that. So we're going to change the if statement, not RB input. We're going to change that to tap LB input. And then we're going to change this to false, because right now I'm just doing it for the left hand. It's taking a long time to change color. Okay, it's good. Now I'm going to make a if statement, if player, not combat manager, if player manager, not player, if player manager is two-handing weapon, then we're going to be using the right hand, and if not, we're going to be using the left hand, because we can only two-hand our right weapon. And let's paste that in there, and let's make this a left weapon, let's make this left weapon, and tap RB action will become tap LB action. You can see how you can get really creative with this. You can kind of add a lot of different ways to throw actions onto items. You can have taps and holds, you can have cancels, there's a lot of ways to go about this. And you can change it from, you can have two sections of actions, a one-handed section and a two-handed section. That's what I've done on my solo project. But I'll get into that before the video's over. That's not necessary, but it's a good idea in my opinion. Okay, so let's go over here and call the function we just made, which is tap LB input. It's going to say right here, handle tap LB input. Yes, that's perfect. And let's go. Oh, I made a mistake. That's not LB, that's LT. There we go. One letter. That's all it takes, man. And right here, we're going to simply say tap LB input equals false after we enter the function. So that's what I meant. If I go right here now to RT input and I click final references, we were actually resetting it in the late update. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. This is fine. This is absolutely okay. But I'm not going to do that. So in this video, I'm just going to do the combat inputs because it's relevant to the video. I'll do the rest in a housekeeping episode. But let's basically go over here now into the input handler and right under the function being called. So for example, if LB input being the exception because it's a hold input, and when you let go of it, it cancels on its own. But LT input, right when you go to the function, set LT input to false again, and then process the logic. So right when you click it, it's instantaneously getting set to false, and then processing the logic. Gonna rename that to tap LT, so it's not confusing. Gonna keep the naming conventions the same. Gonna rename RT to tap RT, and I am going to also come down here and just say tap RT input equals false. So the second we call upon the logic, it's resetting the bool right away for us. And that, in my opinion, is the best way to do it in most circumstances. And it's nicer too. Okay, so hold RB input. Again, this one we don't need to because when you let go of the button, it cancels on its own because that's how we have it set up. RB input, we're going to rename that to tap RB input. And we will call upon the bool inside. So after we press that, the first thing we're going to do is reset tap RB input. It's going to equal false. And then we can save. And right here on the handle rolling and sprinting, if input roll flag, we're going to make the roll flag reset right here. And also erase that delta. Just get rid of that. So if input handler.roll flag, we're going to say input handler.roll flag equals false. So we're resetting it right when we perform the action. This is regardless if you're rolling or backstepping. We're still resetting it. And down here, get rid of the delta on handle falling. Okay, it looks good. That's going to give us some errors though because we're passing those in a couple of functions. Get rid of the delta on handle movement. Okay. And get rid of the delta on handle rotation. All right. Now, just checking this over. Looks good. Save it. Show me the errors. Yeah, okay. So here we go. On Player Locomotion Manager, say time.delta time instead of delta. And over here, erase the delta. This is on the Player Manager. And over here on the Player Manager again, erase delta from all these functions on the fixed update. And I think we're good to go now. Oh yeah, and erase the delta equals time.delta time on both the late update and the fixed update. And update if it's there. You don't need that anymore. Okay, now we're also going to say, we're going to check to make sure the action exists on the item. So in all of these functions right now, where we're actually calling upon an item action, before you actually update which hand you're using, make sure this item has the action you're trying to call. So for example, if tap RB action does not equal null, then do this logic. This is under the tap RB input. If the item has a tap RB action, do the input or do the action, or else basically do nothing. If not, you're going to get some errors if you don't want to give certain items certain actions. For example, like I don't want to give my bow the ability to backstab or to riposte, so I'm not going to. I would leave the hold RB input action variables just null. It would be empty. So if I were to press or hold RB and try to backstab somebody, and there was nothing there, it would give me an error in the console. This is just to stop that. And we're just going to do the same thing with everything here. We'll paste that inside there. Let's do this on the handle tap LT input. And when you get down here too, make sure you're checking for the proper weapon. So for example, on the handle tap LT input, if we are two-handing, we're checking for our right weapon's LT action. If we're not two-handing, we're checking for our left weapon's LT action. It's very easy to mess that up. And then you'd have your weapons acting kind of wonky. You would not know why, because it wouldn't really throw you an error in some circumstances. In others it would. Okay, there we go. Paste that inside. Now handle hold LB input. Man, I should have made a T. My voice is so dry right now. Okay. Yes, so right here this will be the right weapon. Player inventory.right weapon dot LB hold LB input. Or action rather, does not equal null. And down here it will be the left weapon for hold LB action. There we go. Nope, does not equal null. You almost got it there, autofill. You were doing so good. Alright, now that looks fine. Handle tap LB input. Let's do the same thing here. And this is a very long one, but like I said, I wanted to get through all of this in this video because I want to move on to some new content. And I know a lot of this is like this whole video, for example, this portion specifically. It's very similar all the way through. It's a little repetitive because we're just moving around logic, but I felt the need to illustrate the whole video because, you know, there are some things that are a little bit different, and there are a couple things we're going to edit, so I needed to do it, but at the same time, I didn't want to give it another separate video because it's all kind of the same thing. So if I go into the game here now, I am infinitely pressing RB. Tap RB. One letter again. Tap RB input equals false. Okay, we go in the game here now. We're good. Okay, I can do that. And if I use the offhand miracle weapon, I cast heal player that we made a long time ago early in the series. Alright, so let's open up the bow and drag in the the aiming and shooting and drawing arrow actions. So make the draw arrow action a hold RB. I'm going to make the fire arrow action the tap RB. I'm going to make the aim action, obviously, the hold LB. And see, this is why we should have two separate item action classes, one-handed, two-hand, because you should be able to aim the bow if you're two-handing it. You understand what I'm saying? So I can aim here now. That works fine. Oh, my kettle's done. Now, that is cool. I can't draw back the arrow, so let's go in. And this is a very straightforward fix, I'm sure. I think we have to make sure we're not interacting or holding an arrow. So we're not checking for either. I think we used to do that in the player combat manager. So we'll simply say right here, if player is interacting, return, and if player is holding an arrow, return. But as I was saying, if you have two different sets of item actions, one for your one hand and one for your two hand, that would be ideal for a thing like a bow, because you should only be able to aim a bow if you're two-handing it. You should be able to fire a bow if you're two-handing it. You should not be able to fire it if you're one-handing it. So if you guys want, you can add the two-handed actions. If you want me to do a video on it, let me know. Now if I draw back the bow, it works fine. If I let go, it fires fine. Beautiful. If I aim in right now, I can fire it while I'm aiming. Should work exactly the same. And it does. Wonderful. But yeah, if you guys want me to do a video on two-handed actions and one-handed actions, I can do a whole thing on that. It will be very quick. We would just essentially have to just make a couple alterations to the input manager. So what would happen is you would have, I'll just make a header. I'm actually going to do it. I'm just going to cross it out right now. But for example, the bow, if you're one-handing the bow and you went to press LB, what you would do instead of aiming is blocking, most likely. And instead of shooting it, you would punch with it because you're only one-handing it. But if you were two-handing it, then you would aim. And if you were two-handing it, you could draw an arrow and fire and shoot it. That would be the ideal way to handle it, if you understand what I'm saying. But if you want to make it so you can draw an arrow one hand on the bow and fire it, then by all means, go for it. But right now, the two-handed item actions is the best way to deal with a situation like this, because the bow itself, it needs two sets of actions, right? One when you're one-handing, one when you're two-handing, because it acts different depending on if you're one-handing it or two-handing it. Okay, so next let's go into the sword. I'm not going to find that by digging through all this. I'm just going to go and find it manually. Data, items, weapons, sword, and I will go and drag in the critical attack action right here in the hold RB action. And then I'm going to go test this in-game on our nice test dummy over here. So I'm going to run up behind him and make sure I can backstab him. So if I go over to him right now and go behind him, holding the RB button, if this works, should guarantee I can backstab him. And yes, I can. Wonderful. Alright guys, so that is it for this video. Now, in the future, down the line, I will add two-handed actions and one-handed actions as separate variants. If you want to see that sooner, be sure to comment, because I can cover that real soon. If not, I will jump into player leveling and stat leveling very soon. So I'm just going to basically run you guys through how to do a whole level up screen. I'm going to get you to be able to speak to or interact with an object or NPC. That'll bring up the screen, and then we can actually raise our levels from there. So that'll be a couple videos at least, I'm sure. If you made it this far, be sure to drop a like and leave a comment to help appease the YouTube algorithm gods. It does help the series a whole lot. Whenever you leave a comment, whenever you leave a like, genuinely helps a lot. And if you're feeling like a super champion, check out my Patreon below, and I will see you guys in the next episode.